Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I hope you all had a good lunch. Hello, bonjour. So welcome to the Philanthropy Data and Storytelling data session. So ending homelessness requires investment from a range of different sources, both private and public. And getting that money requires fundraisers to tell stories about using data. This session covers how small organizations can raise big dollars with successful major gift strategy and will give participants the skills and knowledge to make big asks. It will also cover how to use data to tell a story on homelessness effectively, critical for your communications, grant writing, and reporting. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge that we are here in Mi'kma'ki on Mi'kmaq territory today, and the first presentation will be from Ali Ryder.
Thanks, Florian. So I changed the title of my presentation. Yes, you are in the right room. It used to be called How to Effectively Communicate Data About Homelessness, but I kept changing my mind about what the title was. At one point it was What I Wish Everybody Understood About Homelessness Data. Anyways, we'll see how this goes. Just trying to get you guys in the room and be interested. So this is my, of course, About Me slide. The important thing that you need to know about me is I'm a data person. Occasionally, did this just turn off? No. Okay. Occasionally, I have heard data people referred to as wizards. I might, in fact, be referred to as a wizard myself. This is important. It'll come up later. You'll see. Here is my contact information if you wanted to call me out on any of my shenanigans later. So, I'm making the bold claim here. You're probably lying about homelessness, but it's okay because it's probably not your fault. Homelessness is a complicated topic, and it's hard to make a definitive statement about it that's 100% right. In fact, I'm willing to bet like $1 million that since you sat down in this room, the situation of homelessness in Canada has changed. There's a different set of people experiencing homelessness than there were 5 minutes ago. In this presentation, I am going to show how both 20% of homeless people and 60% of homeless people are chronically homeless. I'm also going to show how both 6 months and 2 weeks is the usual time that people spend homeless. Are you confused? I'm not surprised. So as I mentioned before, I'm a wizard. I'm a data person. And wizards use magic, also known as data. Now, you know how they say that a magician never reveals her secrets? Well, today you're in for a treat. Today I will be presenting 3 methods that you might be using to unintentionally obfuscate or conceal your data and confuse your audience. I present them to you so that you can learn these tricks and start to recognize them in both your own work and in the media and maybe in this very conference. I'm presenting these methods not in the hopes that you will use them to lie on your grant applications. Have to be very clear about that. I know who's up at the stage with me. But in the hope that you will learn from them and start to recognize them so that you can understand your data a little bit better and be able to grapple and engage with your data more effectively. Now, before I continue, I want to use a disclaimer that in this presentation, I'm using real-world data from several communities across Canada. It's all published online. You might see your own community unknowingly being used in my presentation. I'm not picking on anyone in particular. I think I use about 8 or 9 different communities. Some of the sources that I use, and they're all listed, some of the sources I use are actually very good. The point that I'm trying to make is that any data can be taken out of context and misrepresented. So we're going to be careful about how we use our data. So as I mentioned, all of this data is publicly available and published online, and here's once again my email address if you're really mad at me later. So without further ado, method number 1, we're going to present meaningless data without explaining it. So have you ever heard a statistic in a report or in the news that's something like this? 86% of people surveyed fall between the ages of 18 and 54. I can read my own words. Well, this doesn't really tell us a whole lot. I mean, most of the people that were in this point in time count survey were adults, But that doesn't really say much about homeless children. I mean, they were probably excluded from the survey. So it doesn't tell us much about the youth or the children. Does it mean that we're doing a good job of addressing senior homelessness, or that the homeless seniors are dying early, so that's why they weren't included? Or maybe there's actually a lot of senior homelessness. So the point is that if you just present a data point like that, it is not helpful without more context. So whenever you have a data point, then it's important for you to be able to do something with it. What does it mean? Can we make connections? Can we turn it from data into information, into knowledge? Now, I like to use this slide every time I can because of the unicorn. You probably shouldn't go that far, but you need to take the data that you have, the data point, and say, well, what does this mean? How is this important? And if you can't come up with an answer, then it's probably, not a meaningful data point. So one of the key takeaways that I want you to walk home with today is always ask what a data point means. Another way that you can present this would be to give a breakdown of the different age groups, to say, oh, there was a spike of people around the age of 35 to 39. Now, another disclaimer, at several points during this presentation, I'm going to present a green slide like this that says alternate version. While the original data that I presented is from a legit source, this is something that I might have made up. So the alternate version is, if you had the raw data, then maybe you could present it in a way that's sort of like this. Please do not cite a slide that looks like this. It's not necessarily real. Okay, method 1B, the caveat or the extra way to do this. You can present meaningful data without explaining it. So here's an example. This is a different pit count report, and 22% that they had Indigenous ancestry or status. That's probably very important, but is that a high number or a low number? So if you're in Waterloo, their pit count shows that 11% were Indigenous, but if you're in Saskatoon, their pit count data shows 85% reporting Indigenous identity. So presenting the data on its own without a comparison will leave readers guessing whether that's important, whether it's high, whether it's low. So when you're not sure the significance of a piece of data, look for a comparison. So an alternate version could be 22% reported Indigenous identity compared to only 4% of the general population. Or you could say 22% reported Indigenous identity compared to 20% 2 years ago. It's going up, or compared to the relative or the general population. Now, method 1C, we're going to mix meaningful and meaningless data together. Ready for this? 56% were male, 42% were female, 8% identified as LGBTQ2S, 17% were Indigenous or had Indigenous ancestry, 35% identified as being part of a racial group other than white, 4% were refugees or refugee claimants, 12% were immigrants, 80% were not immigrants or refugees, 26% were youth aged 16 to 24. So this is a paragraph that I stole from this particular report. Does anyone feel a little bit like they're in a Where's Waldo? Like, what was the important thing here? So the key takeaway here is that a wall of data overwhelms your readers. You might want to take out a couple key points and say, okay, let's focus on this. This is the important thing to take away, the important story that I want to communicate. All right, so we're going to move on to our next method. Abuse mean and median to your advantage. So I found this in a report. 188 days was the average length of time that people spent homeless within the past year. Now, a lot of the time, people will hear a number like this, and they'll think that there is a bell curve going on when they hear the word average. So if I said that the average length of time people spent homeless was 188 days, it might be reasonable to assume that there were a lot of people who were homeless around 6 months, and then an equal number of people were homeless for less than 6 months, and an equal number of people were homeless for more than 6 months. However, I'm going to tell you today that that is wrong. And you might be wondering, what? Why is that the case? So we're going to do a crash course in grade 6 math. I know, not everyone in this room is a data person, so we're keeping it very simple. So assuming the set of numbers, 1, 2, 3, 24, 70, there are 5 numbers in that series. The average, also known as the mean, is found when you add them together and divide by the number of numbers. So if we add them all up together and divide by 5, we get 20 is the average. But the median is the value in the middle. So out of 1, 2, 3, 24, 70, then 3 is the median, where the mean is 20. Now, our data looks a little bit more like this. When you take everyone experiencing homelessness and arrange them in the same kind of distribution that I was doing before, what you'll find is most people experience homelessness for 1 day or 2 days. They self-resolve their homelessness on their own, and they're never homeless again. Now, this doesn't feel like that's the case because the ones that we interact with the most are people experiencing chronic homelessness. And in fact, a lot of the people who experience homelessness briefly might not even interact with our services. But you will most likely see, if you look at your shelter data or any other data that includes people who are experiencing homelessness, then you'll see a distribution that's a lot more like this than a bell curve. And so because there's so many people who are experiencing homelessness for a short period of time, and a comparatively few number of people who are experiencing homelessness for a long period of time, it uses a different distribution that's referred to as the power law curve. This is also known as the 80-20 rule, and sometimes in Canada we call it the hockey stick distribution. Now, in a case like this, where it's not a bell curve, then the difference between the mean and the median can be quite significant. So here you can report that the mean is something like 188 days, but the median is actually something more like 15 days. So the key takeaway here is when you have extreme data points, like, most people are homeless for a few months, but then there's that guy who's homeless for 20 years. If you add them all up and divide by the number of data points, then that gets you your mean. The mean will be affected, influenced quite a bit by that extreme data point, but medians are not. So sometimes it might be more useful to communicate the median instead of the mean. So an alternate version of the same data could be something like the typical time people spent homeless in the last year was 15 days, but some people were homeless much longer. No, I don't mean to say we shouldn't count the people who are homeless for much longer. I'm just saying that presenting it as an average implies a distribution that might not be the case. All right, we have 3 methods. This is our 3rd method that we're on to. We're going to cherry pick our data sources to give us the numbers that we want to report on. So I am going to present to you now 2 different reports, 2 different numbers. They both are national data sets. They both come from the same year. They're both large populations of homelessness, and they're going to see really different data. So let's take a look. In 2018, 22.3% of shelter users met the criteria for chronic homelessness. And also, people experiencing chronic homelessness accounted for 60% of all respondents. So you might be wondering how both of these are true. They're both published by the federal government, so they have to be true, right? I mean, how does that make sense? Well, let's take a look at the data sources. Now, the key difference that I want you to look at right now is that the one on the left, the first one, is from the National Shelter Study, which is data from the whole year. It looks at people experiencing homelessness from the entire calendar year, whereas the second one is a point-in-time count. It's just data from 1 day. Yes, there is another difference. The one on the left is just shelter users, and the one on the right includes all forms of homelessness. But the important distinction for right now is that we're looking at data from the whole year versus just 1 day. Now, if I were to imagine a hypothetical population of people experiencing homelessness over the course of a year, then you'll see I'd walk up and point at things, but then it wouldn't be recorded on the microphone. So anyways, let's just imagine across the top, so we have a calendar, January, February, March, and so on and so forth. Each row is a person who is hypothetically experienced homelessness in this fictional world, and they're arranged from the top to the bottom, shortest duration of homelessness to longest duration of homelessness at the bottom. The ones that are highlighted in pink met the threshold for chronic homelessness of more than 180 days in the last year. So this is approximately what our distribution would look like. And in this, you can see that 20%, or 4 out of 20, were chronically homeless. Now, that's really close to our 22.3% that was published. So this is fake data, but it's close to reality. This is what you get when you look at data over time. But if instead you were to look at a single day, and I've arbitrarily picked here May 1st, but you can pick almost any other day and get similar results, then you're gonna exclude a lot of people who experience short-term homelessness, but you will be most likely to capture most of the people experiencing chronic homelessness. So on this arbitrary day, only 5 people were homeless, but 3 of the 5 were experiencing chronic homelessness. That's our 60%. So that's how you can see that both 20% and 60% are chronically homeless. Now, the key takeaway here is that you get very different data from a point-in-time count versus looking at data over time. I'm going to illustrate that again. Oh, sorry. So another way that you could say the same thing is that, say, 20% of those who become homeless experience chronic homelessness, but that proportion is rising. I was actually at a presentation yesterday. They said that it's now not 60% chronically homeless, it's now 70%. So the proportion is rising. So here's how we're gonna understand those differences a little bit more. Method 3B, we're gonna try to make our percentages big. So we're going to use data from a PIC count. We could see a statement like this. More than half of respondents had not completed high school, only had primary, or did not have formal education. So let's just say it was half. That might make you assume that the distribution looks something like this. So it might be hard for you to see in the back, but basically every other person from the top, every other person completed high school, every other person did not. So that's what it might sound like. But it's probably more like this, and once again, please don't cite me on this particular slide. This is all fictional data. But it's probably more like this, recognizing that because we're oversampling chronically homeless people in the PIC count, then the data that's being reported in the PIC count is more reflective of the chronically homeless population. So it's probably more like this. Most people have finished high school. That would be fictionally 15 out of 20 people, but most chronically homeless people did not. So the key takeaway here is that chronic homelessness is overrepresented in point-in-time counts. You could actually say kind of the flip version of that. If you're looking at data over time, it would underrepresent chronic homelessness. The important point is when you're looking at point-in-time count, you're going to see more chronic homelessness than if you're looking at data over time. So an alternate version, and once again, this is made up, don't quote me on it, something like chronically homeless respondents were 4 times more likely to have not completed high school. Something like that. Now, we're going to use the opposite method. We're going to try to make our numbers big. So we can make a statement something like, the number of Canadians who used an emergency shelter last year, or in 2018, was 137,000. Now, I'm from Kingston. That's basically like the entire population of Kingston, which is a huge number. But the key takeaway here is the longer the period of time, the bigger the total numbers will be. So if you look at over a period of 10 years, or over a period of 1 year, or over a period of a month, it's going to be a bigger number than if you're looking at just a point-in-time count. So as an alternate version, you could say something like, about 14,000 people were staying in shelters on an average day last year. Now, this is my last method that I wanted to share with you. We're going to mix and match our data sources. This is going to be fun. Ready? So if I tell you that the number of Canadians who used an emergency shelter was 137,000, and also we did a survey and people experiencing chronic homelessness was 60% of all respondents, then that could lead us to the conclusion that that's 82,000 chronically homeless people. So chronic homelessness is bad, but it's not quite that bad. And the important takeaway here, though, is that we're combining data from different sources, and then that can lead people to a conclusion that is not always accurate. So that's the end of my presentation. I just have a few key takeaways. These are just the same ones that I listed throughout my slide, but all in one place. Yes, I see the cameras coming out. So we can ask what a data point means. If you're not sure, look for a comparison. Try to avoid giving a wall of data. Remember that averages are skewed by extreme values, but medians are not. Always ask whether a data point is coming from a point in time or from a longer period. Chronic homelessness is going to be overrepresented in point-in-time counts, or at least a higher proportion of the people in point-in-time counts. And avoid combining data from different sources unless you're being really careful and know what you're doing. And then here are my sources. Thank you all for volunteering your data, even though you didn't know you did it. And that's the end of me.
Awesome. Thank you, Ali. So next we have Unlocking the Grant-Making Code, Strategies for Successful Homelessness Sector Funding with, we have Gail Bradley and Neil Samet from the Home Depot Foundation and also Michelle Ledun.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gail Bradley, and my pronouns are she and her. And I support the Home Depot Canada Foundation's work by serving as a manager. My primary work is actually on our supplier and vendor fundraising, but I've been with the foundation for over 7 years, so I've kind of experienced the full gamut of our work. And I also have my colleague Neil here with me, who's our primary grant maker and we're going to co-present together. So we're extremely grateful for this opportunity to share more about our foundation's work and how we can work together. Just as the description that brought you here describes, we aim to unveil the inner workings of grant making and share some insider tips and strategies. And so I'll start with a brief overview of the foundation, and then I'll pass over to Neil to talk more about our granting programs and provide those tips and tricks. And then I'll speak briefly to our granting platform. So it's exciting. This year, we're celebrating our 15-year anniversary as a foundation, with the last 10 years being laser-focused on our mandate to prevent and end youth homelessness in Canada. And as I mentioned prior to the lunch, that we've now invested, on the slide at the end of last year was 60.6, but it's now $70 million towards our pledge to invest $125 million by 2030. On the screen here, I do have some highlights of our accomplishments from 2022. So last year we invested $10.2 million into communities, and we brought on 4 new TradeWorks partners, which Neil will speak to that program, and approved 460 grants supporting over 200 organizations. And it's nice to look around this room and see some organizations and some partners that we've worked with for a number of years. So now let's talk a little bit about our strategy. Sorry, there, sorry. I meant to be on, okay, they flipped, that's okay. I can't see the screen, so I'm just going on here. So I'll talk a little bit about our theory of change and give you that insider scoop, what guides our work. And so in 2022, along with our new pledge, our team worked in collaboration with a variety of stakeholders, probably some of you in this room as well, to develop our theory of change and our strategic roadmap. So to begin, why do we feel it's important to focus on youth? And I'm going to use a stat. With over 50% of adults experiencing homeless having their first instance before the age of 25, we know that if we can prevent a person from experiencing homelessness in the first instance, they are less likely to experience chronic or adult homelessness. So our ultimate impact is to foster healthy pathways to prevent and lift youth out of homelessness. So if they do experience homelessness, it's brief and not non-recurring. So you may have noticed also we showed our our latest creative on the screen prior to lunch. With this new strategy, we also changed our branding slightly to reflect, so previously a little bit more dark imagery, but really to reflect that when we provide youth with the resources that they need, that we can lift them up and see positive outcomes. So our strategic priorities are quality wraparound community support, expanding stable housing, increasing youth employment readiness, and then growing our role in the youth homelessness sector as well. Since this is the insider scoop and our focus today is on grant making, we recommend that incorporating some of this language as it relates to your work into your proposals really helps us to draw a clear connection in your proposal and the work that you're doing and how it aligns with our strategy. Our strategy can be found online as well by Googling the Home Depot Canada Foundation Strategic Roadmap. So each of our strategic priorities encompasses 3 themes. Innovation and capacity is one, so investing in charities' capacity to scale and replicate successful programs and pilot innovative ideas. Collaboration is also very important, so strengthening the sector-wide networks and developing those partnerships. And then knowledge building, so investing to understand root causes and possible solutions. I will now hand over to my colleague Neil to talk about our granting programs.
Thank you, Gail. How's everyone doing today? You can do better than that. How's everyone doing today? I'm going to take a page from Sam Watt's message this morning, and I'm going to ask you all to turn to your left and to your right and to thank the person beside you for the work that you're doing. Just take a moment and do that. Look them in the eye, genuinely thank them. Keep it going, keep it going. Thank you for doing that. And the reason I did that was, as a funder, it makes our job exciting and at the same time overwhelming and daunting because there are so many of you doing phenomenal work out in the field. So I wanted to make sure that you looked at each other and you realized the power and the potential and the impact you're having. You've heard it, umpteen times over the last couple of days, and I just wanted to thank you for that. With that, I will officially begin. So hello, my name is Neil Sambit. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm currently the Community Investment Specialist for the Home Depot Canada Foundation. I'm responsible for developing, executing, and evaluating the Home Depot Canada Foundation's annual granting programs, and I support the annual strategy of the Foundation's work and identifying opportunities to strengthen its mission to prevent and end youth homelessness. I'm also only a few weeks into this role, so go easy on me. So for starters, you can see here we've got our granting streams, and we're going to give you a quick overview. So we have 4 main funding streams that provide funds through our granting program, Smart Simple. We'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. We've got the Community Development Grant, the Youth Opportunity Grant, and the TradeWorks and Strategic Partners programs. We also have 2 community-based programs that I'm sure many of you have heard of, our Team Depot Volunteer Workforce and the Orange Door Project campaigns. These 2 ensure that funds raised in-store and online from all of our 182 stores go directly towards local community partners. And if you'd like to learn more, as Gail has said, please come by our booth and we will tell you more about them. Now, both the TradeWorks program and the Strategic Partner streams, the reason they're grayed out here, is they're what we consider to be developed relationships that are not open for application, but they are built over time and are a selected type of program and partnership. So we're not going to delve too deeply into those today, but I will provide you with a brief overview of those 2. TradeWorks is a program, is an investments organizations across Canada empowering over 200 youth with the skills and certifications needed to help them secure a living wage and attain permanent housing. The TradeWorks funding commitment helps provide education and employment opportunities to young people overcoming homelessness. We help empower and support youth with the tools, training, and social supports needed to find a stable, well-paying career so they can begin to find a home of their own. And since 2016, the Home Depot Canada Foundation has supported organizations across Canada that find impactful and innovative ways to prevent and end youth homelessness. Grants support either a renovation project, prevention program, employment, education, or a hybrid of the pillars that Gail has mentioned. Currently, we support 17 organizations with grants ranging from $125,000 to $300,000 a year. And if you want to learn more, again, swing by our booth. Now, the two streams that I think you're going to be most interested in are our community development grants and our youth opportunity grants. So what I'll do is I'll focus on this slide here. So with a community development grant, again, we support registered charities with prevention, workplace readiness, or housing needs programs with a youth focus. The maximum grant is up to $10,000. The preference is usually given to repair, renovation, and/or improvement projects, to housing and/or other support facilities, like employment services for homeless youth. And we will be opening these applications in the early spring. The final dates are TBD. So we do want you to stay in close contact with our website. You can email us at any time if you're interested, but our website will be regularly updated to keep you up to date on what our time frame is. And our Youth Opportunity Grant, the Youth Opportunity Grants consider applications, again, from Canadian registered charities dedicated to preventing and ending youth homelessness in Canada through housing, prevention, and employment programs, including housing transformation, healthy pathways or prevention, and youth innovation, which include youth-led initiatives and education programs. And the maximum grant here is up to $75,000. And again, with this as well, we'll be opening these up in the early spring. Please stay tuned with our website, and we'll update you on the more accurate timeframes as they get finalized. Now, prior to launching these two streams, we will host an introduction or orientation session 2 to 3 weeks prior to for all of those interested. Now, if you've already registered or have a profile on our Smart Simple portal, you will be notified automatically. If you don't, I encourage you to email us at, we'll give you the email address on our last slide, with your contact information and expression of interest, and we'll be sure to reach out to you to let you know about that orientation session. Now, you're probably wondering, how can we access these funding dollars? You might ask yourself that. Let's look at some of our key criteria when reviewing and considering an applicant. First of all, is there anyone here who has successfully applied for funding and received it? A show of hands. Okay. Now, you could probably all, I'm sure, if we asked you what those nuances are to fine-tuning your application to achieve success. The key thing here is, it's not rocket science, as those who have had success know, but it does take attention to detail. And that's really the bottom line here. We lay out our criteria. You just have to make sure you're matching the I's to the T's, and you're making sure that your program aligns with our criteria. So first and foremost, we ask things like, did I change the slide accordingly? Yes, I did. Do they directly serve youth experiencing or at risk of experiencing homelessness? Youth, again, is defined as ages 13 to 29. Does their focus directly align with one or more of the Foundation's strategic priorities? What are those, easy for me to say, strategic priorities, you ask? Well, I'll remind you. Gail talked about them. Quality wraparound community supports, expanding stable housing, increasing youth employment readiness, and assisting us in growing our role in the youth homelessness sector. Do they work on projects that are aligned with the Foundation's targeted outcomes? And again, this isn't earth-shattering information here. It's fairly straightforward, basic information, and I think that's the key here with all of the applications. Do they offer a space that's inclusive to all youth, regardless of how they identify? Is their work informed by the voice of the youth that they serve? These are really important elements to an application. And do they align with our priority focus of Black or Indigenous-led organizations? Now, this next slide here, again, nothing earth-shattering. But if you take your time and you really get yourself into the mode of applying for these in a matter-of-fact format, you're going to do just fine. Plan ahead. Start well in advance. Give yourself ample time to prepare a strong application. How do you do that? Set up a Smart Simple profile. Get into the system. Look at the questions that we're asking. Build your case accordingly. It's just like that. Research the grant. Understand the purpose and the requirements of the grant thoroughly. Make sure your project aligns with the grant's goals. Address the selection criteria. Tailor your application to the specific criteria outlined in the grant guidelines. And again, you can review all those questions once you have a profile in Smart Simple. Get into the system, look through all the questions, make sure you're able to answer them. Demonstrate your impact. Clearly articulate the potential impact of your project on the community or field. Be compelling. Be clear, avoid jargon, and just use plain language. Tell us what you're doing and the impact you're having. Proofread. Again, this is something that it's essential. If we have to filter through all of the applications that we get through, the easier you make it for us, the easier it is for us to respond accordingly. So go through your application a few times, bounce it off of your colleagues, get a senior manager to look at it, whatever you have to do, get another pair of eyes on that application and make sure there aren't some glaring errors, there aren't some oversights. Make sure it's telling the story you want it to tell. And with that, I just want to say good luck. Over to you, Gail.
And I'm just going to end on a note just to talk a little bit about our platform, Smart Simple, that we use. Neil's mentioned it a few times. And over the course of the past probably 24 months, we've tried to make a lot of improvements to ensure that our partners have the best user experience. Kudos to one of our teammates, Marilyn, who's really spearheaded making those updates and listening to feedback. So a few points that I just wanted to make on here. Neil alluded to going on and creating the profile. So once you have a profile in our system, your organization is saved. You don't need to add details about your organization when you go in to apply for another grant. And then if you have a profile and say somebody leaves, you can always request a new password or reach out to us directly. Our contact's on the next slide. But we also do recommend that you add multiple emails on there. So if you have different people working on grants at different times, then they can all access them. You can save your application and go back to it. Once you begin, you can also view all the questions. So you could take the questions away and sort of think about them and then come back. Once you have a profile, you also have a dashboard, which we hope is helpful. It can help you see if there's any funding opportunities currently available. You can see your profile and if need be, update any information on it. You can see if you have any applications that are in progress, in review, approved or declined. And then you could also see if you have any reporting requirements. And then, of course, on the next slide, we just want to make sure that you are equipped with our contact information. Mine is there, Neil's is there as well. We do have a foundation inbox, and we do recommend, in the first instance, probably going to that, because then anyone on the team can respond, and you'll get probably a quicker response, because whoever is best equipped to answer will respond, and our foundation website. So thank you, and I'm going to hand over to Michelle.
Hi, everyone. I don't have slides today because I missed the deadline, didn't get my act together. Thought I could do that on the plane kind of last minute, and definitely not. So I'm just going to complement what Gal and Neil shared kind of from a different type of foundation perspective. My name is Michelle Ledon. I recently became the executive director of a private family foundation in Montreal called the Pathy Family Foundation, where I was previously responsible for our Montreal-based giving. And you're all probably like, what's the Pathy Family Foundation? No one's ever heard of us because we keep a very low profile. The family is very discreet and has traditionally given in a largely anonymous fashion. But we are active across Canada, largely in Indigenous communities in urban centers, but also across the north. And we're also active internationally in areas of poverty relief in general, but really focused on prevention, resilience, and empowerment of the populations that we aim to serve through our grant partners. Prior to my foundation life, I was in probably a lot of shoes that you are in. I was fundraising for a frontline community organization in Montreal called Dans la Rue. And before that, I was with an organization called Hockey Helps the Homeless, which maybe some of you know, and helped design their first ever fundraising strategy about 10 years ago. So I've been on both sides of this equation, funder and applicant, if you will. And I just want to share some kind of anecdotal knowledge and things to think about. But before that, I just want to start by saying this whole kind of conversation in my mind is a bit backwards. In an ideal world, it would be the funders sitting there learning how we can adapt our practices to better suit your work, and rather than you fitting into a framework and there's a lot of work to be done on our side, and I think the good news is the sector evolved a lot during COVID. COVID, kind of the intersections of the pandemic, some major social movements that we all saw kind of take root across North America in a bigger way, Black Lives Matter, what happened with the residential schools. A lot of old school kind of white savior foundations couldn't keep going the way they were going, which is good news. And the Canadian government has responded accordingly with some new regulatory changes for foundations in terms of how much they need to disperse annually. You may be vaguely familiar with this. So foundations historically had to legally disperse 3.5% of their endowment. And that has been raised to 5% of their endowment, which is what it is in the United States. And in some cases, this means millions of extra dollars being flowed into the sector and into the system. And my dream and my hope is that that doesn't all go to hospitals and universities, and it goes much more into community work, participatory, peer-led work. So just to keep that front of mind when you are having interactions with funders, that they likely have a lot more money available than they did before. And all of us that work in the homelessness sector, because homelessness is such a complex and intersectoral, is that a word? Intersectional, sorry, the French, like sometimes, anyway, it's hard for a foundation to legitimately tell you that homelessness doesn't fit into their strategic plan. Because homelessness can be mental health, it can be housing, it can be public health, it can be whatever. So kind of don't take that for a no. Don't accept that answer, because it's definitely a part of your work, an aspect of your work, or a part of your work that you want to develop likely does fit into one of their buckets or one of their strategies. So think really broadly about the populations you're serving and the issues you're working on, and I guarantee you there's a way to fit it into almost any foundation. So just to keep that in mind. The other thing I would say is that, unfortunately, I feel like community organizations are often feeling like they're in competition with one another for funding. And we can, as we know, be a lot stronger when we work together. And this is true for funders too. It's something we really look for at the foundation. If we see community partners working in collaboration, or we see community partners building networks, building an ecosystem, and we can, it's like bad to say it this way, but like you get that much more bang for your buck because you're supporting the resilience of a whole community ecosystem. So don't be afraid to reach out to the partners you collaborate with and say, who's funding you to do this? Oh, well, who's funding us to do this? Oh, well, maybe we could get this together and present a kind of united front, a united kind of proposal. And I think a lot of foundations are also looking to do that amongst themselves as well. So you can have kind of collaboration on two levels and just magnify the impact that way. Another thing I would say, has anyone heard of the term trust-based philanthropy? Is that, yes? So it's become kind of like a buzzword in our sector, and it's really based on that idea of building a relationship with your grant partner. It's a partnership rather than a transactional relationship. And you allow the organization to determine their priorities. You go at their pace. You evolve the funding according to their needs. And you try to limit the burden on the partner in terms of reporting, applications, et cetera. This takes time, and it requires a relationship with the funder that a lot of funders, us included, any of you are sitting there Googling us, you're like, but wait, I can't apply to the Pathy Foundation. It's like, that's exactly accurate. And I'm working to change that. So this is not the type of thing you can unfortunately develop with every funder. But I bring it up because more and more foundations, especially private family foundations, are moving this way and are looking for the opportunity to be educated to learn, to adapt their own practices to your reality and to your expertise. And so whenever even if it is on a grant form, don't shy away from really setting the stage, really providing that context and the background and speaking, how do you say it in English? Intersectionality? Is that a word? Yes. Of the challenges you face and the realities that the people we serve are living with every day. Because guaranteed, the large majority of funders have never worked frontline. They've never even worked in a community organization. A lot of them went from like grad school into like corporate jobs, and now they're making decisions about funding that means people's jobs, people's livelihoods, and they don't have the context to do it. And I feel like we do a disservice to the amazing work being done on the front line when we shy away from talking about, sorry, I'm not emotional, it just sounds like it. When we shy away from the reality of what it is. I remember when I was writing grants, we didn't want to talk about harm reduction. We were like, oh, we can't put harm reduction in the grant application. They're gonna be like, oh my God, all the kids are using. And it's like, no, we have to talk about the intersectional realities our populations are facing and why this funding touches on so many different things. So really like fill out that context, tell the story as richly as you can. The data piece obviously is important. That was a great presentation, Allie. So yeah, really take that opportunity to educate, to share, and to build those relationships with funders whenever you can, whether that's through your partners, like, hey, who's funding you? Can you make an intro? Go to events where funders might be, like United Way stuff, or like whatever it is. Use those opportunities to share your knowledge and use that as like a bridge, an entry point with foundations. I'm probably going over time, but just to say also, anytime a funder is asking you to give feedback on their processes, do it, but also only do it if you're being compensated to do it. Because this is like my dream, that we're paying organizations to write applications to our foundation. Like if you're gonna put the time in to write, we wanna compensate you, we wanna support you through that process. So anytime a funder's like, hey, how was this, whatever, give feedback, give honest feedback, and hopefully make sure you're compensated as well. Yeah, I think that's it.
Wonderful. So thank you to Neil, Michelle, and Gail. And next up, we have Elizabeth Noble from the CAH with a Big Gift, Small Shop, Introductions to Major Gifts.
Amazing. I'm also going to just add on that if you don't already have access to a grants database, it is a great investment. I personally love Grant Advance. They're a Canadian company, and they have a really incredible mail merge feature that none of the other grants databases have. So if you're looking for grants, definitely take advantage of a database. There's also often subscriptions to grants databases in your public library. So the United Way might also have something like that. So yeah, if you're doing that prospecting piece, that can be useful. Oh, I see that's on the next slide. So I'll just start by saying my name's Elizabeth Noble. I'm a certified fundraising executive. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the philanthropy lead at the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness. And we have already done a territorial acknowledgement, but as someone who lived here on Mi'kma'ki for 12 years of my life from age 10 to 22, I'm super grateful to be back here and to be a guest on these territories. So we are going to talk about the F word, fundraising. It can be scary, I know. So who loves receiving money for their mission? Hands up. Yes, yes. Who loves actually going up to someone and saying, will you donate to my cause? Great, you're going to be amazing at this. So I'm going to take a step back and ask the question, what is money and why are we so hung up about it? And I'm going to provide this Alternate definition from Deepak Chopra: money is life energy that we exchange and use as a result of the service we provide to the universe. Obviously, this is not what you usually think about when we say the word money, but I think it's a really useful, more positive perspective. Like, there's a lot of hang-ups around money, and it's because, we don't have any. But money is not inherently evil. Like, it's quite neutral itself. But if we have a more positive attitude about what money is, then we can take that perspective on what it is, what it does, and how we actually get it. So what is the oldest form of money? Obviously there could be money that is older than written or oral history that we're aware of, but right now the oldest money that I'm aware of is a coin from 610 to 600 BCE. But lots of different objects have been used as money throughout history: livestock, shells, beads, etc. Who knows where the first paper money was invented? Any ideas? It was actually in New France, here in so-called Canada. And essentially what happened was that colonial authorities ran out of silver coins, and so they used playing cards to actually pay their soldiers, and they signed the back, and that signature was what gave it authenticity, and that's often why we see signatures on money today. The key with money is that it represents more than just the physical value of the object. And so we have signatures, we have figureheads, we have scenes that represent all of our values. On the left, we have this older series of money where we've got our good old Canadian natural resources: logging, sealing, fishing, etc. Does anyone remember what was on that $10 bill from this series? Anyone old enough to remember? It was Chemical Alley in Sarnia. It was a big gas plant that produced polymer, which apparently was very important for the war effort. So money essentially is just a convenient way to transfer energy among humans. It's a means of exchange. And again, it's not something inherently evil. In fact, money is one of the greatest examples of humanity's ability to cooperate, collaborate, and share a common understanding around value. A little bit more money trivia. So Parker Brothers has printed more money for Monopoly games than the Federal Reserve has ever issued in real money in the United States. And only 8 to 10% of the world's currency is actual physical money. And no, it's not Bitcoin. It's just that most transactions happen digitally today. So the value of money is actually only created when it's exchanged. It's just a number in your bank account until you actually do something with it. And so most of us have falsely learned to associate money with our own intrinsic value as a person. And this is particularly true for men. And this is really problematic understanding that a lot of us grew up with, and it's demeaning, and it continues to contributes to systemic racial and gender-based inequality, and we can choose to let that notion go. We are not our money. We are much more valuable as human beings than just this means of exchange. And talking about money is one of the last taboos. It's part of why it has been to employers' benefits not to talk about wages, and why there's a growing trend for transparency in compensation. And so if we're able to actually talk about money together and realize that it's just a tool for transferring energy, then we can liberate our own hang-ups that we might have around money. Now, when we are fundraising, we are literally raising human energy to a higher purpose. We are taking people's money and we are making their dreams come true by creating the kind of world that we all want. And I know so often when we're fundraising, there is this power imbalance, but the work that you do brings just as much, if not more, to the equation than the people who have the money. They just have that ability to give you the money. They're not the ones that are doing the work. You're the ones that are doing the work, and you really do provide that value. So let's unravel the myth of scarcity. So it is both a reality and a myth. We exist in a world where there is scarcity of affordable housing, but we also exist in a world of abundance, and this is a place with abundant resources, a culture of people who care about each other, and a nonprofit sector with tens of thousands of brilliant, kind, hardworking people like you. And abundance is the natural state of being. The sun pours way more energy onto the earth each day than we could ever use. Cherry trees don't worry about limiting how many blossoms they produce. They literally shower the ground with millions of petals each spring. And any tiny crack in the sidewalk, you will see those little tufts of grass popping up. That's the natural world. It's a world of abundance. Of course, you know, newsflash, it's not equally distributed. So, you know, here we are. These are some of the people that have money. I don't know if you notice anything in common about these three folks. But we're, you know, the reality is that the world is not actually a world of scarcity. This is the world according to the myth of scarcity, that there's only one pie. That's it. We all have to fight for our piece. There's only so much to go around. No more pie can ever exist other than this one. And of course, that is not true. Money is a renewable resource. Just like there's not only one pie, there is not only a finite amount of money or service that you can provide to the universe. I think I just duplicated that slide in the process of updating this. So, gratitude is the attitude that brings abundance. And the best place to start with raising major gifts is by thanking your existing donors. Your existing staff, your volunteers, your community. And by starting from that place of gratitude, if you're calling up your donors to say thank you, you are learning about their motivations, you're developing connections, you're building loyalty, and you're reminding them of why they gave in the first place. And it makes them feel good. And so starting with that place of gratitude is the first place to begin when raising major gifts. People give because it feels good. You are providing that service to them. You're coming to that equation with something valuable. And so just take a minute to think about a time that you've given something to someone else. How did it feel? It could be money, it could be a gift, or it could just be giving someone a hand by opening a door when somebody's carrying a bunch of stuff. And how did it feel? Did it feel good? Did it feel bad? Giving is not a rational experience, it's a completely emotional one. And again, giving is a two-way transaction, and I really believe this. Like when you are asking people for money, you are giving them that opportunity to spend their money in the most meaningful way they can. It's going to make them feel so much better to have changed the world than any kind of iPhone, whatever gadget they could spend their money on. So remember, it feels good to give. It doesn't feel bad. The key here, though, is that the land of nonprofit sustainability does not exist. An abundance mindset is not enough to raise major gifts. It's not like you can just do one thing and thank everybody and the money is just going to pour in. It really does require ongoing work to generate abundance. So we start with that center of gratitude, and then we begin by cultivating our own belief in our worthiness as an organization. We are worthy of millions of dollars with the hard work and adequate resources invested in fundraising. You will generate abundant support, which then further fuels your belief that your organization is worthy of major gifts. Fundraising and grant making is all about relationships. And there's an old adage that people give to other people, not to organizations. And this is exceptionally true with younger donors. Younger donors are giving much more straight to people than they are to organizations, you know, through GoFundMe, Kickstarter, or even just people on the street. And so it's really important to remember that you have to develop a relationship with the people that you're raising money from, whether that's a foundation or major donors. We have to invest in our relationships. So most people think that fundraising, in particular major gift fundraising, is all about asking. And for sure, there's definitely a time where you will have to ask someone for money, but that's actually not a very big part of major gift fundraising. Most of major gift fundraising is just about connecting, which is much more in people's comfort zones than saying, would you like to give me $10,000? And in connecting, a huge piece of what we're doing is actually just listening. We're listening to our donors. We want to get to know them personally. People really do usually enjoy talking about themselves. So if you sit down and ask them about themselves, they usually do like to tell you. And then by providing that space for them to feel seen and heard and validated, you're establishing a connection, and that absolutely will translate into fundraising success. We're really providing them for the opportunity to express those deeper motivations and to connect with that physical feeling of giving and good. So I'm going to quickly run through the Certified Fundraising Executive fundraising cycle just so that you can see that there's a logic here. You start by identifying someone who might make a good donor. Then you qualify them to actually make sure they would be a good donor. Then you cultivate by establishing a connection with them. And then you ask, which is just a very small portion of that fundraising cycle. And then, of course, the most important thing is the stewardship. And that means not just thanking, but also ensuring that you use their money for what you said you were going to use it for. So in that first step, identification, this is a map of an organization's universe, and you can use this as a fundraising tool. It's called Rosso's concentric circle constituency model. And essentially in the center are the people who are the most connected with your organization. So leadership, board, major donors, funders, anyone who's right at the heart. That could be your current staff, et cetera. And then you literally will sit down with folks and start making a list of people. You move outwards because the further you get out from the center, the less likely those folks are to have a connection with your organization. So it could be then the employees and past boards, your donors, participants. This is just an example that I did for the Canadian Alliance leadership, but you can customize this for your own organization. The second step is qualification, and this is figuring out if that prospect actually is a qualified prospect. And so there's three things that a qualified prospect would have, which is often referred to as linkage, ability, and interest, or sometimes it's called connection, capacity, and commitment. But the idea is that there's a link with your organization. They actually have heard of you. Ideally, they might actually know somebody who is connected to your organization. The second is interest. They actually care about the cause. So if all they care about is animals and you're working on homelessness, that might not be an ideal donor prospect. And then the last one is capacity. Do they actually have the ability to give? Do they have a good income? Have they inherited money, et cetera? And if you have those three things, that's a highly qualified prospect. The next thing is cultivation. And cultivation can look like a lot of things: newsletters, print, email, social media, telling stories, photos, videos, phone calls, texts. A lot of major donors like to text now, so don't rule that out as a way to connect with someone. Petitions, quizzes, surveys, site visits, events, coffee, going for a walk, et cetera. Any way where you're actually connecting with the donor. And remember, it's a two-way process. It's not just about putting out newsletters. It's also about getting information back and being able to connect with your prospects. The next piece is that solicitation, and this is the one that's really scary. And here's some guides for how you can actually make the ask less scary. It needs to be done by the right person, for the right ask, for the right amount, the right way, and at the right time. So the right ask usually means, or the right person usually means a board member, the executive director, a peer of the donor, or a fundraiser. Ideally, you will have two people in the room when you're actually making an ask from the organization. Not too many, you don't want to overwhelm them, but it's better to keep the conversation flowing if you've got more than one person. The right ask means to make sure that you have understood what the donor's motivations are, and you're not talking about something that seems irrelevant. You want to connect emotionally with them, make sure that you frame your ask in a way that they understand. With the right amount, you want to make sure your ask is realistic. If you don't know how much to ask for, you can just ask your donor. I don't know how much to ask you for. We need this much money. How much do you think you could help? But having a specific amount is also recommended if you have a good sense of how much capacity they have. Make sure you do the ask in the right way. If they really don't want to meet with you in person, I've totally asked for large gifts over text message. It's not ideal, but if that's how they want to communicate with you, then you need to respect that. And yeah, if they're texting back and forth, you have their attention, so don't be afraid. And then, of course, the last thing is the right time. If they've just sold a business, probably a great time to ask. If they've just got laid off, maybe wait a little bit. The last piece is stewardship, and it really is the most important piece of the fundraising cycle. And just like it's cheaper to prevent homelessness, it's much cheaper to keep a donor than convert a new donor. And stewardship means everything from giving a tax receipt if you're a registered charity to thanking, reporting back, and making sure that the donation is actually used for its intended purposes. Now, a major gift program does not happen by accident. I'm not saying that major gifts don't come in out of the blue. That certainly does happen. But a major gift fundraising program requires that you actually plan it and you plan to go through all of those steps together. It's always built on a foundation of a solid annual giving program. So if you don't already have a marketing program to acquire new names, email addresses, et cetera, you can be doing them at the same time. You don't have to wait to start raising major gifts, but it is essential that you actually have a pool of prospects to begin asking from. Okay, and here are some pro tips. These are just a few things that I have heard many times and I find to be true. People can usually give 10 to 20 times more than they are currently giving. So if you sent out an email and someone asked for $20, they can probably give 10 to 20 times that if you cultivate them and you sit down and you actually say, we need $2,000 for this particular program. Is that something you could do? And it could be that they give you $200 a month for 10 months, but just because someone's only given $20, don't rule it out. I've had a woman who gave $5 a month, and then I had coffee with her, and turns out that she's a chocolate heiress, and her family foundation gave us $50,000. So don't rule it out. You just never assume. That's the second piece. Sorry, I didn't go ahead. Don't assume for your donors. You really don't know. Again, don't underestimate the power of monthly gifts. Some people can give much more if they are giving monthly. I personally do that. There's no way I'm going to come up with $1,000 at once. That's just not realistic. But I might be able to muster $100 a month for 10 months. Make time and actually ask. Again, you have to be intentional. If you're not scheduling major prospect visits, you're never going to actually get around to asking. And I know it can be scary to pick up the phone or request a meeting, but make the time and you will be very surprised. The next is that anyone can raise major gifts. Believe me, I fell into this. I was fresh out of art school and we just wanted to throw parties. It's true, we had art. We wanted our friend's band to play, and suddenly I was like, beer sponsorships and renting a loft and you know, and then there was a job that was a fundraising job, and I thought, oh, I've done all of these things. So you don't have to go to school. In fact, there's only like one higher ed program for fundraising. Most of us who are in this position are accidental. And I think that's a strength. If you were a professional fundraiser, that doesn't come across as genuine anyway. You're doing this work because you care, and just be yourself. And this is a good one. The number one reason that people don't give is because they weren't asked. It's not because they don't care about the cause. It's that they just literally were not confronted by someone or an email. They just weren't asked. So make sure that you are providing your donor prospects with the opportunity to give. If you're not asking, then they just may not give. Oh, and I have this still left over in French. Here are some major gift fundraising resources. These are 3 women that I love to follow. They're on LinkedIn, they're on social media, etc. Amy Eisenstein, she runs a subscription-based course called Mastering Major Gifts. I think it's like $200 a month, and it was extremely beneficial for me to actually get enough credits to write my Certified Fundraising Executive exam. Ria Wong also is a coach that coaches executive directors and fundraisers on major gifts, and Kia Kroom has the Black Fundraisers podcast. So action items for you. I hope that you will take some time to visualize abundance. Visualize how good it feels to actually give, and visualize the world where your organization is raising lots of money. Start where you are. You have everything you need to begin major gift fundraising right now. Use your database, meet with your board, make a list of people you can start approaching. Be consistent. If you just do this once, you're not going to have a major gift fundraising program. You're going to need to keep it up. Excuse me. Practice the gratitude. Call, thank repeatedly in all of your communications. And make the ask. Please do it. I know it sounds scary. If you have a donor and you're needing to ask and you're terrified, email me. I'm always happy to give you a little pep talk. And feel free to add me on LinkedIn, Elizabeth with an S, Noble at the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness. And that's it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Elizabeth, and all of our presenters. So now we have a bit of time for some questions. If anyone would like to ask, we have one here, and our room ambassador will be passing you a microphone. Oh. No, we can't hear you. Is it on? No? What's your question? Just, I can try to repeat it for the microphone. You're welcome to come up if you'd like to, up to you.
This works. Yeah, use this. No, that was this one.
This works, yeah? Okay.
Oh, perfect.
Come up. Come up.
Come on down. You are the next contestant on Ask Us a Question.
Hello. Hi. Thank you very much. So thank you, first of all, for the brilliant presentations. It was really great to hear from you all. Just for context, my name is Shakira Grant. I'm based here in Nova Scotia. And I have a question, but I also feel the need to solicit a little bit while I'm here, as you said. So just because it hasn't really been brought up throughout this conference, in Nova Scotia, we have over 50 historic African Nova Scotian communities. So these are communities that were settled for over 200 years across the province. And we have very, very unique needs because of the settlement of these communities. So one very specific, I guess, instance of this is I'm a descendant of Black Loyalists. I'm an 8th generation Black Loyalist descendant. And so when we arrived, and when all of our waves of immigration arrived, we were promised land that we didn't get, and that problem is actually still manifesting because now we have people that don't have clear deeds or don't have clear titles. They're not able to sell their land, they're not able to retrofit their land, they're not allowed to pay for grants, all of these things. And so there's a process that we're going through right now to address that need, I guess, in certain communities. But there's a lot of us here that are organizing to try to get funding to actually buy land and to pay for these processes so their communities can be rebuilt on clear title, et cetera. So that was the soliciting part. But then the other piece, the question that was attached to this, is that in the presentation I noticed, that there was one that said they prioritize Black and Indigenous peoples, and there was a lot of conversation about the desire, I guess, for philanthropy or for foundations to support these organizations. But what are the actual practical ways that that is happening? Are we hiring people from these communities? Do we know these communities? Is this, for example, if this is the first time we're hearing about the African Nova Scotian history, it doesn't make it likely that when we apply that story is going to be understood. So what are some practical supports that are being offered to these communities that we're saying that we're targeting?
Good question.
Thank you so much for the question. It's interesting because we just started funding the Elizabeth Fry Society of Mainland Nova Scotia, and it was a big learning curve for all of us. And I think, well, I mean, we can just talk straight. Like, there's a lot of work that needs to be done from the government all the way down to private funding. A lot of these things are the responsibility of the state, and they've not been addressed. And if philanthropy mobilizes to its full extent, ideally it's also working in collaboration with governmental funding, which has been should be made much more accessible at the same time. So I think we're one piece of the puzzle, and my question I'm always asking myself is, how can philanthropy play its fit in this jigsaw puzzle of social change in the least harmful way, in the most productive and impactful way? And how can we use what we learn from our partners to bring other funders and bring other influential institutions along with us? In terms of concrete things, and again, I'm very new to the Nova Scotian context as well, so I don't want to like speak out of turn, but I think from what I've seen even just in the last 5 years in this work, and certainly when we think about what's going on in the Middle East right now, there's an increased attention, I think, and comprehension and understanding around how important it is to restore power, decision-making responsibility, community development responsibility to Indigenous populations and to disenfranchised populations. And I know that it's not across the board, but there are foundations who are really ready to take kind of like more of a backseat role and just provide the funding for exactly what you're talking about, mobilization by the community itself. So just to say that I'm like fully on board with you, it is happening in small ways. I feel like in the Canadian context, work with Indigenous populations, certainly in our work in urban contexts and also on reserve and in the north, is kind of leading the way. And hopefully that same kind of modality can be applied to other groups who have had their rights violated for a really long time. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done. Right after this session, the Canadian Alliance is hosting a funders table, and the topic is, what is the role of philanthropy in ending homelessness? And we've invited Matthew Martel from the Black Business Initiative to sit on the panel, and we've got Pam from the Mi'kmaq Native Friendship Center, and we're putting people in the room together just to start. There is no question that the people who have that kind of money to distribute often acquired that money from exploitation, resource exploitation, exploitation of labor, slavery, et cetera. Like, there's no question that there is an ongoing imbalance of power, and that philanthropy itself has some pretty problematic dynamics to try and solve. So there's no easy solutions other than to say that building relationships and developing understanding is the biggest weapon we have in terms of addressing some of that. Yeah? Yeah.
I just remembered you also mentioned about who's working in the field, and I think that's very important. I think the more that we can hire folks from the communities we're trying to serve, obviously, that would be better. People who, as I mentioned, like, who have worked on the other side, who have been in other contexts, who bring a different lived experience is so important, because so often and for too long, I think, philanthropy has just been talking to itself, and it's been very insular, and it's been, we have whole panels, like, how do we get the money? Like, it's hard to penetrate. And I think diversifying who's working in the field and hopefully eventually who's making the funding decisions. It shouldn't be white families on their boards. It should be people with lived experience of the issues we're targeting making those funding decisions, or at least strongly contributing to them. And we've got a long way to go. We're like just at the start of that as a sector, I feel like. So well heard.
Really, what's so sad is you're just trying to get clear title to your own land. And I mean, and it's been going on for hundreds of years. And, you know, what is the problem? You know, like, how do you do it? Like, is it the provincial government, the federal government, lawyers, like, fundraising, like, just, you know, it's a very emotional topic. And it is certainly, you know, there needs to be so much more done. It's just really sad. And, you know, the history behind it, you can't have clear title, you know, like development or anything at all. Like, the resources are so rich. But yet, you've been living there for 200 years. You've been kicked out of your own place that you began with, moved somewhere else, and you still can't, you know, like what about squatters' rights years ago? Like, you would eventually have clear title to your own land, like, but, you know, not even that comes into play, which is totally wrong. So, like, you know, it's just a very emotional, degrading, just, look, just hearing about it just gets me all riled up, really, it does. Yeah, so what do you do? Where do you go? How do you know? Is there another avenue? Like, you know, who do you contact over and above what you've already done? Like, even just the cost of lawyers.
That's it. I think we're talking about how. Can you guys hear? Okay, so I think that's a really important piece, and I think that's something that philanthropy kind of overlooks sometimes. Like, how can we have impact that goes beyond just the grant dollars that we're providing? And it's that influence piece, and like, we make a concerted effort with our partners to make sure they have resources available. Like, we'll pay for lawyers, we'll pay for consultants, we'll pay for whatever they need to undertake their advocacy efforts, because it's like, that's kind of a value add that we have within our networks, because, you know, as we just said, the people who have this money have access to influential people and influential networks that we don't have access to. So using that above and beyond our grant dollars is something I think we need to do much more kind of systematically. We should be offering it like always. Sorry.
Oh, I think my microphone works. Do you want me to bring you the microphone?
It's being recorded, so
Here.
we need it, yeah. She's going to bring a cordless.
Sorry, I just wanted to say something regarding what you just said, and also regarding what you just said, which would be finding a lawyer that would donate their time as well, you know? Because that's another way of giving. Anyway.
Thank you. Raised hands for more questions? Yes, we have one here.
Hi, we'll jump in. So just kind of quickly, there's the comment made about kind of moving to a trust-based funding relationship. I've personally been involved in a number of projects, and some of them were trust-based, which was incredible and allowed us to grow so incredibly fast and take chances. And there's this question that comes up when the trust isn't there, I think, and it's, what are your expected outcomes? And it feels like a very loaded question from the funder's perspective. So just if someone can speak to a little bit of how do we break that down, what's really being asked when you're asking what expected outcomes means, because it's often results from my perspective is people not taking chances and kind of putting very predictable processes in place to just secure the bag. And once they get the bag, they can, you know, play the game or kind of take whatever next step is in front of them. But it'd be really nice to move to different questions and different frameworks that we can move to that trust model. So just kind of the question, I guess, is what's really being asked when we ask, what are your expected outcomes? Because I find it troublesome.
Me again? Okay. Do you guys want to go?
I don't have much to add to it. Other than to say, one of the slides that Gail had shown was our focus on innovation. And One of the things we're actually implementing as part of our granting stream is a reporting structure. So we've had some 6-month and 1-year kind of terms where we ask our recipients to report back on us and some metrics. We're implementing a trial actually very shortly, and then we're going to launch that through all of our other programs. But it's a more robust metric system so that there's a lot more clarity on what it is we're asking, and it gives you an opportunity to voice that clearly. So, currently there's some fairly generic questions, and if you meet, the criteria, it qualifies. But at the end of the day, we still want to know what's our return on investment. Are you actually implementing and doing what you said you were going to do? And this new evaluation system is going to help us get that intel and get that information and give you the opportunity to share that with us in a more accurate manner. I don't know if that answers your question. Ish.
I would just say, and I know I don't speak for all foundations, but at our foundation, what that question reads is, what does success look like for your organization, and how would you define it? And we, right underneath that, say that we understand that those effects are, changes is happening at a human scale, at a human pace, and that results, come tell, are going to be qualitative and human focused rather than quantitative. So we let the organization define their own outcomes, their own what would be a positive outcome for them, and we base any kind of evaluation on their own measurement of their own progress. So I know that's even more vague, but I think letting the organization itself decide what those outcomes are is what's most important.
Going to add a ditto to that. No, but that is, I'm glad you brought that up, because it is part of our evaluation, is qualitative and quantitative. So we're looking at both metrics to make sure we're getting a full picture, not just, so how many youth were helped in this program. It's, what does help mean, right? What is the outcome for each of those individuals, and what does it look like qualitatively? So, yes.
Awesome. We're going to take 2 more questions. Here you go.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your presentation. Bernadette Hamilton Reed, 8th generation African Nova Scotian. My sister Shakira, thank you for recognizing. One thing about philanthropy, especially for the African Nova Scotian community and Blacks and Caribbeans, is we are not getting the money. I know, as you said up there in the presentation, in the lives of Black Lives Matter and George Floyd, the government has started to give some money to Black organizations, but previous to that, there's been a report out that less than 1% of equity-seeking groups are receiving philanthropy money. So we were successful. I'm the executive director for the African Nova Scotian Decade for People of African Descent Coalition, big name. We're called DPED. We do a lot of advocacy work here in the province. And we were successful in getting United Way money to hire a grant writer to help our community. So we have a grant writer that's going to go around, and we're going to do 50 workshops throughout the province to help Blacks, Caribbeans, and Africans become consistent and know what the knowledge is, know what the wording is, because I think one of you said that you should be listening to us. What are the barriers to your applications? And one of the biggest barriers in Home Depot, I love that you're able to give money, is for somebody to have charitable status. That is one of the biggest barriers, especially in the Black community and equity-seeking groups, because charitable status costs between $2,500 and $3,000 to get to start with, and many of the monies that you get does not allow you to use that money to get your charitable status. So unless you can get a pro bono student or find somebody that can do it, that's money coming out of your organization's pocket. And most of our organizations are grassroots to begin with and don't have that money. So first off, the systemic barrier is charitable status. You did talk about partnerships, so if you find somebody in your community that wants to partner with you, fine, but they don't want to take on your responsibility if you don't have the same fix with them. So that's something I would really, all of your organizations need to look at. Why isn't it a barrier, and why do you need charitable status? If the organization's been around for 20, 25 years, has a good track record of serving communities, what is it about the charitable status that makes them better than somebody that doesn't have charitable status? If they have good books, they're reporting to CRA, that should be what's taken into account, not that they have that RT number. So I'd like you to look into that. I'm glad that you are doing workshops and doing that. There needs to be more workshops, and we're happy to be doing them across the province now, but there needs to be more of that, where you as the funders are willing to come out and sit in community. And you need to be in community, not in hotels. You need to come to our churches, to our community centers, where the people are, and tell about your money, because we don't know where it's at. So if you don't know where the money's at, you can't access it. And that's one of the biggest things. So I'm glad you're having a workshop with the Black funders or whoever you're doing today. And the one that talked about your foundation, the family foundation name. What is the name, and are we able to apply for it? Or is it a secret?
No. It's in the program. It's the Pathy Family Foundation, Pathy.
Okay.
And yes, we can definitely talk. And the other thing I wanted to say, I meant to mention it when I talked about the regulatory changes. There's also changes coming around non-qualified donee status. So if foundations are telling you that, it's going to pretty soon be bullshit.
And I can say that just part of our advocacy work, we met with the Red Cross and Canadian Foundations because we have told them for 10 years plus that is one of our main barriers.
Yeah.
So they have come to us when they put out the last round of money and asked what one of the barriers were, and we said the qualified donee is one of the biggest things holding us back. And they said, well, we've heard that it's going to change. Well, why isn't it changing? They need to tell communities why it's not changing and get the communities to support them to write to government and say what's happening. Advocacy work works when we all work together, not by ourselves. So if you need help from us as the organization's trying to get the funding, tell us what the bureaucracy and the policies are telling you that you can't do so that we can access some more money. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And now, one last question.
Merci pour votre présentation. Julie Denis de la Maison du Père à Montréal. Vous savez que les organismes ont toujours de la misère avec les donations qui ne sont pas pérennisées. Est-ce que vous y pensez? Parce que c'est comme une roue, hein? On veut un projet, ça va bien, on embauche, on sort les gens de l'itinérance, puis après, pouf, c'est coupé. Puis là, il faut tout le temps survivre. Fait que c'est sûr que, je le sais, là, je comprends que ça ne peut pas être à vie, mais est-ce que c'est quelque chose qui est pensé dans vos organisations?
I'm gonna,
Oh no, vas-y.
No, I was going to ask you to start with your answer there. Since I'm not as familiar with the terminology in French, I won't be able to translate the entire thing. And if you wouldn't mind answering in English, and they'll translate with the simultaneous interpretation for everyone else.
Yeah, so I can
that
also
okay?
translate the question.
Yes,
if that's
please,
So,
if that's okay.
merci pour la question. It was around the fact that the large majority of donations come annually. They're not multi-year. And it puts you in this kind of vicious cycle of always having to be applying for funding. And absolutely. So, I think, pour moi, c'est la moindre des choses qu'on peut faire en tant que fondation, en tant que donateur privé. C'est la moindre des choses qu'on peut faire. Chez nous, à la fondation, depuis le tout début, ça fait 15 ans, on donne que les pluriannuels. The shortest donation you would get from our foundation is 3 years. Most of them are 5. And the idea is exactly that. We want the organization to have a little bit of breathing room, to be able to find other funders, to be able to build programs, et cetera. And I think more and more people are moving that way. I think the government obviously should also move that way. But à mon avis, c'est la moindre des choses qu'on peut faire. Ça change aussi la vie pour nous parce que c'est moins aussi d'admin. Côté fondation aussi, c'est comme un no-brainer. Et je ne sais pas pourquoi on n'est pas encore là globalement.
Merci. Thank you again to our presenters, the wonderful comments, the feedback, and the questions. Thank you, everyone.